Hi, and welcome to the I T'd Myself podcast. My name is Matthew Miniman, and this is episode 63, Technician Grab Bag. So, we're going to try a different type of episode this week. We're not going to do a deep dive. We're not going to do one of my normal weeks where I just yell at the clouds and bitch about Microsoft, although that is fun. We're going to do what I'm going to call a Technician Grab Bag, and this is going to be talking about specific issues that I've seen over the years as an IT person and the weird and sometimes freaky causes of those problems and how to solve them, and maybe even cover how we got from not knowing anything about what was going on to solving the problem. So, first off, we're going to talk about this specific ticket. This one was a client called in, said, my computer won't turn on. And the technician got on the phone with the customer, with the user, and the technician basically troubleshot the initial computer. Basically was like, this won't power on. We've unplugged it. We've plugged it back in. We've taken out the battery. We've done everything we can to this computer, to this laptop specifically, and it still won't turn on. This laptop is dead. We need a new one. And this is a specific problem. This actually happens quite a bit. I'm actually surprised about how often this happens. When I made the transition from refurbishment into IT, I saw this a ton in refurbishment, and I was not prepared for how often I would see this as an IT person. Specifically, watching technicians just kind of flub on this one, because this is actually a pretty significant issue, pretty simple problem to fix, and a lot of times it just takes a couple of extra seconds to resolve. So what the actual cause of the problem is the computer's been put into surge protect mode, and most modern motherboards will put them into a position called surge protect mode. I think I've talked about this in the past. And what surge protect mode is a specific mode where a computer has detected that it has turned on or off, essentially received a power surge in too short of a time span, and has basically put itself into a position where it's not going to power on for fear that it will damage the internal components of the motherboard or the CPU. So this is a significant problem. And if you don't know that this actually exists on a laptop or a computer, a whole desktop, it can appear like the system is dead, because what will happen is the lights will power on, fans will start blowing. Basically, it looks like everything else works, just the display doesn't work, because that is how surge protect mode works, is that the function of the surge protect mode allows everything else to power on except for the CPU and the main bus of the motherboard. So, how do you fix it? Well, in order to fix it, it really just takes a little bit of extra time. When you power off your computer and unplug it, you just need to hold the power button while it's unplugged and has the battery removed. You need to hold the power button for about 10 seconds. And what this will do is it will drain the rest of the power from the system. And that's why you have to remove the battery as well. If there's a battery attached to your laptop, this won't work. But if you remove the battery, remove the power supply, and then attempt to power the computer on with no power attached, this will drain the remaining power out of the motherboard, get it back to a zero state, and then you'll have a working computer once you turn everything back on. This happens, like I said, this happens more often than I would have thought coming into IT from refurbishment. We saw this a lot in refurbishment because when you're moving quick and attempting to repair systems at a high pace, you're unplugging and plugging computers back in at a just, rapid pace. And sometimes you mess up plugging a computer in, you miss a couple of times, and that puts it in the surge protect mode. And boy, do repair technicians hate that. So, moving on. Next one, I cannot connect to the internet. This one was a user called in basically complaining that they are connected to their Wi-Fi. They are able to see the Wi-Fi and see that they are connected, but they can't connect to the internet. Nothing works on the internet. It appears that they can't access anything. Their computer, even their Wi-Fi adapter sees that they are connected to the internet or connected to a network, but they can't do anything. And even when they unplug or disconnect from the Wi-Fi and connect to a hardwire, they still get the same problem. They cannot connect to the internet. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason as to why, because the technician got in, they checked, they can't ping anything. They can't even ping the gateway of the network, and they can't ping anything inside of the network. They can't ping Google. Nothing seems to be working. And there's just no reason for it because everything else is working about the computer. Rebooting the system doesn't seem to be working right now, and unplugging the adapter doesn't seem to be working. So this one was a pretty significant problem because the technician wasn't really sure how to go about resolving it. Now, one of the quick ways to resolve this, in my experience, has been to disable and re-enable the network interface card, the NIC, but that can be a dicey proposition to walk a customer or user through. Really what the problem was is that the IP stack, the IPv4 stack of the network card needed to be reset because for whatever reason, it was not initializing that it had a gateway. It was not initializing that it had an IP address. It was just kind of sitting there without being able to connect to anything because it couldn't establish those variables on the actual interface. So this one took a while to understand exactly what the problem was and how to fix it appropriately, simply because it really did seem like the network card on the system had just fried. And it was a problem that when we were troubleshooting it initially, we really didn't see any specific cause. And it just sort of kind of happened. Like it felt like it was a sickness, an illness that spread across networks because it was started to happen. And what we found out, what we've been able to determine is that since like Windows 10 1604, there was some update that Microsoft pushed with Windows that caused another issue with the IPv4 stack. And I don't know if it was because there was a sensor put on there from Windows Defender or whatnot, but basically, however that update affected the NIC is what started causing this problem. And it will still happen occasionally where just randomly when you're connecting and disconnecting to different networks, the IPv4 stack will just need to be reset. And again, and that's why when you disable and re-enable the NIC, it kind of resolves the issue because that as a part of that, you're resetting the IPv4, you're resetting the IPv stack. So yeah, that one was one of those ones that kept us running around chasing our tails for a little bit, because it's just like, how the fuck do we solve this? And remote support, trying to support a user who's out at home and doesn't really come to the office at all is just a bitch, especially when you don't have a dynamic admin for that system. Next one, a remote server is inaccessible. So this one was a user called in. They're attempting to access the remote desktop server for the company, and they can't. And there's no rhyme or reason as to why. They can ping the address or the host name of the server. They can access everything else on the internet. They can even get to the HTTP splash page for the remote desktop services on the server. They just cannot connect using Microsoft terminal services at all, and they're not entirely sure why. And we investigated this quite a bit as with the technician, because again, this user could ping everything on the internet. They had full access to the internet. There was no issue with them getting into the server. With them getting to any other service on the internet. But when they attempted to access the server specifically, they were denied. And there was no indication on the server that there was a problem. Everybody else on the server was able to access it. Nobody else in the company seemed to be having this problem. So this one was one of those where we had somebody just randomly go, "Hey, do you have an ISP modem? Like, does your ISP pay for your modem?" And the guy was like, "Well, yeah. The modem I've got says that my ISP's name on it. Yeah, I think that's theirs." And so what we did is we got into the modem, and this specific ISP left all of their passwords on the modems. It's actually the modem router. It's both combined, which is a terrible idea. They left a password on them, a generic password, and we were able to get in as admin into this modem. And when we got in, we identified that there had been a security service turned on, and it was something like X Security Services or some shit like that. It was a ridiculous name. And when we turned this off, lo and behold, they could connect to the internet. It was, they could connect to their server. It was amazing. It was like a night and day difference. And what we had found out is that eventually the ISP, or evidently the ISP, had turned on the security service as an update to their modems, because over the course of the next few weeks, it started happening again and again and again as people who used the specific ISP basically got the same update. And what was a bitch about this problem is that some of the modems across this ISP were not the standard username and password. And so we had to call the ISP for the user to get the ISP to remove the security services from the account. It was stupid as fuck. And goddamn it, I guess I'll just call them out right now. Xfinity, don't fucking do this. It's not your responsibility. You're causing more problems than you're solving. RDP is still a legitimate protocol that can be used over the internet. And I know a lot of other security guys will bitch and complain about, it's insecure. It's a horrible protocol to use. And yeah, I understand that, but the reality is you're going to have something open for some companies, because workflow does fucking matter. And if you don't have a business, you can't run an IT department. So, sorry, the reality of the situation is you're going to have RDP open at some point in some situations. Anyway, moving on. This next one, we have a client. A user calling in saying that their PDF is taking hours to print, and the user has wasted so many hours of work just waiting for their PDFs to print. And this is one of those ones where I feel like IT gets put into kind of a shitty situation, because this is a specific circumstance where a user is blaming IT for their inability to do their job, when it's really their lack of I don't know, their lack of care that's preventing them from doing their own fucking job. And this one got brought up because the supervisor of the user sent in an email and said, this person's been waiting for 6 hours for this to print, and this is unacceptable. I cannot believe you guys would allow this to happen. And we had no idea, because this person didn't fucking tell us. This person probably thought it was great that they were having to wait 3 hours, 4 hours for their PDF to print, because then that was an excuse for them to not have to do any work. And which is why we didn't hear about it until the supervisor brought it up to us, because this user didn't give a shit. They didn't care. And they knew that all they had to do was blame us. And yeah, it was just basically a get out of jail free card, which is bullshit. Anyway, the tech investigated this problem, and what they did is they attempted to print. When it didn't print immediately, they started to investigate the printer. They uninstalled the printer, reinstalled the printer, did all of the normal things that you would do for troubleshooting a shitty printer. I don't understand why they would have to print this anyways. But they were troubleshooting it, and nothing worked. Nothing seemed to help the situation. Printing XPS, it would print the XPS, but the XPS would still take hours to print. They could print PDF, and that would work, but they could print a PDF to a PDF. Pretty funny. But nothing else really seemed to work. And so what we ended up having to do is troubleshoot it from the Adobe side, because obviously the printer was working fine. Every other document that this person tried to print would print fine. So the problem had to be with Adobe or whatever the software was they were using to print. So we investigated that, and nothing else seemed to be wrong. So we tried all of the other settings until the technician made a change to a specific setting called use. The specific setting within Adobe was ignore fonts, use system fonts only on the document. And when they clicked this, it printed basically instantly, and there was no overlap, there's no problem. And this was a situation where when you printed with the system fonts, the page would look funny, but it was at least something to get around the problem. While it was a workaround, while we identified what the initial cause was. And so when we went back and we looked at what the actual cause of the problem was, when you printed this PDF just straight up, what would happen is the spooling job that would be created would just sit there and tick up and up and up in size. And the issue was that we found was that the font that was being used for the PDF was having an issue with rendering. It actually caused some sort of like overflow issue where it would just scale up, like anything printed with a specific font would just go fucking crazy and wouldn't properly render within the spool job. And so basically we had to go back to the person who created the document, and in this circumstance it was a company that created this document, and say, hey, this font sucks. Why do you use this font? And it was a situation where we couldn't really control it because it was outside of our company. It was outside of our responsibility. So we basically had to say, hey, when you get a document from this company, you can't just print it. You actually have to prepare the document in another way. And then that resolved that issue. But it was a weird one because, like, one, it's a printer, so nobody gives a shit anyways. Printers are terrible. Why you have to use hard copies for any fucking thing in 2022, which is when this specific ticket was. Why you have to use a printer in 2022, and manually have this piece of paper is beyond me. But be that as it may, it was a PDF problem that was the result of a font rendering issue. So next one, this is a problem that was with an entire company. The specific client has a remote desktop server, and when they connect to their remote desktop server, it takes a long time to load. Everything takes a long time to load. When they first log in, it can take up to 5 minutes for the profile to load before they can begin clicking around the screen. When they attempt to do a search, the start menu takes forever to populate and shit like that. And we spun our wheels on this for, we probably spun our wheels on this for 3 weeks before we found the actual cause of the problem. And this is because everything else about the server operates normally, unless you did a search and when you logged in, it would take it. Everything else seemed to work just fine. You could open up your browsers, you could open up Word, you could open up every other application, and nothing else seemed to be an issue. So it was really difficult to kind of pin this down. And what we ended up identifying is that this server specifically, this specific server version, and we had several different clients on several different versions of Windows Server. We had some on Windows 2016, we had some on 2022. But this specific version, this specific server was on 2019. It was Server 2019. And what we did is we investigated. We ended up having to go into the registry and just look around and see what if there were any issues with the registry, because one of the things that we found is that the size of the registry was about 6 times the size of another server. Like all of our other servers, the system registry was somewhere around like 300 meg or something like that. And this registry had ballooned up to 2.5 gigs. And we're like, what the fuck is going on here? That's a big number. That's a lot. So, at least 1.5 gigs larger than the next closest server. So what the fuck is going on? And what we did is we investigated this like registry bloat, and what we found is that there is a tip registry. Basically, it's a testing registry that got left on, a debug registry that got left on from the base code of Microsoft 2019 when they were testing something. And every time that you did any interactivity with the start menu or loaded profile, it would add debug entries into the registry. And so basically every time that Windows would load or you would attempt to access the start menu, this fucking registry would just continue to pile on. And that's what was causing it to be slow. And it would steadily just get slower and slower. And actually what the registry is for, what this fucking utility is for, it's for the goddamn hand signature or goddamn it, it's for tablet interface. That's what it was. It was a tablet interface. So basically, if you connected to this remote desktop server app from a tablet, it's the fucking service that populates the on-screen keyboard and allows you to do things like handwriting and typing on the screen. And this fucking service just ate up the registry and would continue to do that. And so what we ended up having to do, how we solved this, was we basically created a startup task in the task scheduler that would clear out this fucking registry at every boot. And since the server rebooted once a day, it would basically clear out this registry, because there's no fucking reason to have this debug code. No other version of Windows has it. Nobody looks at this shit. It's just something Microsoft accidentally left on and didn't fix, and they still haven't fixed it as far as I know. So yeah, we ended up resolving this issue, but it took a long fucking time to find out. Well, anyways, that's the 5 that I had marked down for this time. Hopefully you guys found some entertainment value with these. But I hope you guys have a great day.